Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today's tutorial is keeping true to my modern crochet roots with a clean, ribbed, single strap bralette / tank for a minimal modern make. Speaking of, by now y'all already know the drill, but just in case you're new, modern crochet tutorials and patterns are here with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 110 grams of yarn. That's 245 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you wear a watch. When I think about it, I always say no, but they are so useful, so yes, I now am a watch wearer. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5mm hook and start off by making a chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to our underbust, so roughly where an underwire would sit. Now I need roughly 4 inches or 10 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 18. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to do a half double crochet row. So start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then we're going to do a half double crochet row. So starting with the yarn over, into that chain that we blocked off, or the 3rd chain from our hook, we're going to bring our hook down, into that chain that we blocked off, then we're going to yarn over, pull through to get 3 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 3, and that is our first half double crochet. Let's do that again. Yarn over, into that next chain, we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain, leaving the last one. We've made our way down with our row 1, leaving that last chain. Now into that last chain, we're all going to do an increase of 2 half doubles. So we're going to insert into that last chain with 1 half double, into that same last chain with a 2nd half double crochet. Now we should all have 1 more stitch, then chains made. Then our following row is going to be a back loop slip stitch row to get some ribbing. So we're going to chain 1, that's our turning chain, flip our work. From here, 1 back loop slip into every stitch. Finding the last stitch from our previous row, insert in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through both loops on our hook. Again, next stitch is back loop, yarn over, pull through everything. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. We want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise the following row will be a little too tight to work into, but from here, continue with 1 back loop slip into every stitch. We've just completed our row 2. Now for the rest of this portion of the piece, it is going to be a half double crochet and slip stitch row alternating, but now all within the back loops. So to get started on our following half double crochet row, we're going to chain 2 and flip. That chain 2 is our turning chain, then we're going to yarn over, preparing for a half double. Into the last chain from our previous row, we're going to insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Once more, yarn over, into that next stitch's back loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, leaving the last one. We are back with our first 3 rows. We should have left that last stitch. Now we're going to increase into that last stitch, so yarn over. Into the last stitch's back loop with 1 back loop half, into that same stitch's back loop with a 2nd back loop half. From here, it is going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. So a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases, then a back loop half double crochet row that ends with an increase of 2 until we now have a portion that can stretch, because it does have a decent amount of stretch to it, from mid underarm over to the corner of our underarm. Then I'll meet everyone back right after a slip stitch row so we can continue on with the rest of our underarm portion. The first half of my underarm portion is complete. I have a total of 4 rows completed. My width is just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters unstretched. Now we have a second half of the underarm portion to do, which just gives us more of a curve along the top to get a clean line that leads up to the shoulder. The following row is going to be another half double crochet row. So from where we're at, chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving that last stitch, then I'll meet you back. We've made our way down with our half double crochets, leaving that last stitch. Into that last stitch, we're now going to do an increase of 3 half doubles. Yarn over, into that last stitch's back loop, insert, starting with 1 half double, into that same last stitch with a second, into that same last stitch with a 3rd half double crochet. We should have 2 more stitches than our previous row. Now we are going to need to increase into our slip stitch row as well. To increase into the slip stitch row, we're going to start with a chain 2. That first chain is going to count as a stitch for our following row. That second chain is going to count as our turning chain. From here, we're going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, starting with the second chain from our hook. So flip our work, and into that second chain from our hook, insert with 1 back loop slip stitch. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Once we reach the end of the row, we should have 1 more stitch than our previous row. Then it is going to be a repeat of these 2 previous rows. So a back loop half double crochet row that ends with an increase of 3 half doubles, then a back loop slip stitch row with an increase into it as well. Continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we now have a portion that can stretch from mid underarm all the way over to the front of our body, so roughly where a bra strap or a tank top strap would lay. Then I'll meet everyone back right after an odd number row, so that will be a half double crochet row, then we can work straight into the shoulder together from there. So we are back. The second half of my underarm portion is complete. Now I have a total of 7 rows. This width is roughly 2 inches or 5 centimeters unstretched. Now we all should have ended along the top. What we're all going to do from here is make a chain that reaches the top of our shoulder. Now we want to make sure that our tail end is still staying 1 inch underneath our underarm and the bottom of our piece, so the blunt end is still roughly at our under bust or where an underwire would lay, just to make sure that everything is fitting perfectly. Now I went ahead and already made my chain. Now I needed roughly 5 inches or 13 centimeters, so I made a chain of 22. From here, we're going to do the following row in our row sequence, which is slip stitch rows. So from where we're at, block off that last chain, then do a chain up of 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. From here, put 1 slip stitch into every chain. So starting with that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. From here, continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Then once we reach the body portion, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch to reach the end of the row. Our first shoulder row is complete. Now our following row is going to be a back loop half double crochet row. So we're going to chain 2, flip our work since we're all along the bottom, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. And from here, we're just going to continue on with these back loop half double crochet, back loop slip stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, until we now have a shoulder portion that's roughly 2 inches away from the side of the base of our neck. We want to make sure that we're leaving those 2 inches for the top band that we're going to have as well. But once we have the shoulder portion completed, I'll meet everyone back right after a slip stitch row, so that we'll be along the bottom. Then we can start it on the width of the front panel together from there. We are back and my shoulder portion is complete. Now I have a total of 10 rows. That's roughly 2.5 inches or 7 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to get started on the decrease portion of our front panel. So we're going to want to put this up to ourselves, still making sure that our tail end is just about 1 inch underneath our underarm and the top of our shoulder is at the top of our shoulder. Then we're all going to insert our stitch marker into the stitch that we have that's nearest to mid chest. So I'm going to start by inserting my stitch marker into the 20th stitch from the top. That's just about 4.5 inches or 10 centimeters. Now from here, since we all should be along the bottom, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work. Put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving 2 stitches right before our stitch marker stitch. So we've just made our way all the way up, leaving 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now we're going to do a decrease of 2 back loop halves. So what we're going to do is yarn over. Insert your hook into that second to last back loop, pull through. Also into that last back loop, which is the one right before our stitch marker, pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook. Then yarn over, pull through all 4. Then our following row is going to be a slip stitch row, no increases, no decreases. So chain 1 and flip. From here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, then I'll meet you back at the end of the row. So our back loop slip stitch row is complete. Now what we're going to do from here is repeat our 2 previous rows. So since we shall be along the bottom, what we're going to do is chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, closing off the row with a decrease of 2 back loop halves, then a back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases. We're going to continue to repeat those 2 previous rows until this portion that we have can reach roughly 1 inch underneath our underarm. Then once we have that completed, I'll meet everyone back right after a back loop half double crochet row. Then we're just going to continue on with the length of our front panel together from there. We have just completed the decreased portion of our chest. Now I have a total of 25 rows. My width is roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to do back loop half double crochet rows with no increases and no decreases until our panel can reach from mid underarm across our chest to mid underarm. Now I went ahead and already got that portion already completed up for you. And I now have a total of 41 rows. My width is now 11 inches or 28 centimeters unstretched. So all we're going to do right after that last back loop half double crochet row with the decreases is we're going to chain 1, flip our work, 1 back loop slip into every stitch, chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop half double into every stitch, and just continue on with that, making our way all the way across. We will end right after an odd number row, so that is a half double crochet row, do a chain up a 1 and cut right after that, then we can get started on the back panel. So getting started on the back panel, it's just going to be basically what we did here, but in reverse, because the ribbing that we have isn't reversible. So what we're going to do is start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches as our last row that we did for the front panel. Now for those of you that have my numbers, I had a total of 19 stitches. So for my back panel, I'm going to get started with a total of 19 chains. Then back loop half, back loop slip stitch rows for the same amount of rows that we have for the width portion of our front panel. So that's going to be right up until our first row where we did our decrease if we're counting from the opposite direction. So for those that have my numbers, just counting my back loop slip, back loop half double crochet rows with no increases, no decreases, I had a total of 16 rows. So as you can see, I went ahead and already did a total of 16 rows here. Then we can get started on the increase portion for the back panel that leads up to the shoulders. Now since I already have this portion completed, I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you just so we know how to get started with the back panel. So once we have our chain to get started on the back panel, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then from here, we're going to half double crochet into every chain. So starting with the yarn over, into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a half double crochet. Again, yarn over, next chain, pull through 3, and continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. Now that our first row is completed, we're going to do a back loop slip stitch row. So simply chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, still remembering not to tug too tightly. Continue on with this to reach the end of the row. Then at the end of the row, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, and put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. Now just continue on with our back loop half, back loop slip stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, like I said, for the amount of rows that we need for this portion of our back panel. Then I'll meet everyone back. Our last row should be a back loop slip stitch row. So we are back. The width portion of our back panel is completed. Now we're going to get started on the increase portion of our chest. So since we all should have ended right after a back loop slip stitch row, we're all going to chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last stitch, and I'll meet back to increase. So we nearly completed with our first increase row. We should have all left that last stitch. Now into that last stitch, to mirror the front panel, we're just going to do an increase of 2 back loop half doubles into that last stitch, since on the other side we did a decrease of 2. Now for the slip stitch rows, we aren't going to do any increases or decreases, so simply chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip into every stitch. So we are back. Our back loop slip stitch row is complete. Now from here, we're just going to repeat these 2 previous rows. So back loop half double crochet row that ends with an increase, then a back loop slip stitch row for the same amount of rows that we have for the front panel's decrease portion. Once we have the same amount of rows, I'll meet everyone back so we can work straight into the shoulder portion together from there. So we are back. We have just completed the increase portion of our chest. Now from here, we're going to make a chain that leads up to the shoulders. Now it does need to be the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on our front panel decrease. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 20 stitches. So from here, I'm going to make a chain of 20. Then we're going to do the same back loop slip stitch, back loop half double crochet rows with no increases, no decreases for the same amount of rows that we did for the front panel. After that, we should all end right after half double crochet row, which is along the bottom. Then I'll meet everyone back so we can finish up with our 2 underarm portions. We are back and our back panel's shoulder portion is complete. My width is now just about 8.5 inches or 21 centimeters unstretched. Now we're going to do the first half of our underarm portion. So we're all going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led up to our shoulders from the front panel. So looking at the front panel, for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain of 22. So for my back panel, I inserted my stitch marker into the 22nd stitch from the top. Now the following row is going to be back loop half double crochet rows. So chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. So we've made our way up with our first underarm row, leaving 3 stitches right before our stitch marker. Now we're going to do a decrease of 3 back loop halves. So yarn over, into that third to last back loop, insert, pull through. That second to last back loop, pull through, and into that last back loop, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. Then from here, yarn over and pull through all 5. Now our following row is going to be a slip stitch row, and we do need to start the row off with a decrease as well. So we're going to chain 1 and flip our work. From here, we're going to start the row off with a decrease. So insert your hook into that first stitch's back loop, pull through. Next stitch's back loop. When we have these 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through all 3, and from here continue with 1 back loop slip into every stitch. First 2 underarm rows are completed. From here, we're going to repeat these 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as the second underarm portion that we did for the front panel. Then once we have the same amount of rows, I will meet everyone back so we can finish up with the second half of our underarm. And just to let you guys know, the amount of rows that we should have for this portion of our underarm should end on an odd number. So I'll meet everyone back right after a back loop half double crochet row. So we are back. The first half of our underarm portion is complete. The total width that I have is 9 inches or 22 centimeters unstretched. Now we're going to finish up with the last underarm portion. So what we're going to do is start with a back loop slip stitch row, no increases, no decreases. So chain 1, flip our work, 1 back loop slip into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, 1 back loop half into every stitch, leaving the last 2 stitches. Then I'll meet you back so we can do our decrease of 2 together. We are back, and the first 2 rows for our second underarm portion is nearly completed. We just completed a back loop slip stitch row, no increases, no decreases, then made our way up with a back loop half double crochet row, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're going to do a decrease of 2. So starting with the yarn over, we're going to insert our hook into that second to last back loop, pull through, into that last back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4, and that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows for the same amount of rows as our first underarm portion for the front panel. Once we have the same amount of rows, do a chain up a 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back. We are back, and the entirety of our back panel is completed. Now my total width is just about 11 inches or 28 centimeters unstretched. Now from here, we're going to seam up the sides together. So first things first, we're going to lay our front panel on top of our back panel, making sure that the ribbing is faced out for both panels. We are going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Now that could be the shoulder underarm or the other underarm because they're both going to be done exactly the same way, but the amount of stitches may be a little bit different. But all we're going to do is insert our hook into the bottom corner stitches like I said, insert our yarn onto our hook and pull through. We're going to do a chain up of 1 to secure, and we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, we're going to insert only into that front loop. First stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop. When we have these 3 loops, we're all going to yarn over and pull through all 3. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop. yarn over, and pull through everything, and we're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we are back. Everything is all seamed together. Now we're going to seam up the shoulders, and we're going to start along the outside of our shoulder, because then once we work our way to the inner corner, we can just work straight into the top band together from there. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out. Then insert our hook into the outer corner stitch of our shoulder. We are going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure, and simply put 1 single crochet into every side row. Now since I only have 3, I will only have 3 single crochets. So just finding that first side row, this is mine right here, find that top loop, insert in through the front panel, find the next top loop within the back panel, insert in through that top loop, and single crochet. Again, into that next side row within the front panel, which should be a side half, insert in through that top loop, next side row within the back panel, insert into that top loop, which should be a side half again, single crochet, and that's it. Continue with 1 single crochet into every side row until we don't have any more side rows left, then I'll meet you back. So now that our shoulder is all seamed up, now we're going to work straight into the top band together. So that's going to be pretty simple. It's going to start with a single crochet row. Right after we made our way across our shoulder seam, we're going to start with 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then 2 single crochet into every side half, 1 single crochet into every side slip, making our way all the way back up and around. So chain 1, 1 single crochet into every stitch, then I'll meet you back once we reach our first side row. So we've made our way down with our single crochet row. Now working into our first side row, which should be a side half double crochet, we're going to insert with 2 single crochets. So into that top loop, insert with 1, same top loop with a second single crochet. Again, into that following side row, which is a side slip stitch row, we're going to find that top loop and insert with just 1. Once more, top loop of that following row, it should be a side half double crochet row, then into the top loop of that following side row, which is a side slip stitch row, insert with just 1 single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around and making our way all the way back up, then slip stitch into that chain space once we made our way all the way around, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Now we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the top band to be. I'd like for mine to be roughly 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 6. So once we have our chain, block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Into that chain that we blocked off with the second chain from our hook, go ahead and insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. From here, continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, and we do want to make sure that we're still not tugging too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. We have now put 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So into that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, still does not count as a stitch, and flip our work. From here, we will be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding the last stitch from our previous row, not worked into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop with a slip stitch. Then from here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, then I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We've just completed our first 3 rows. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way we just did. So just finding that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Again, that's just to connect, and since we're here, just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, does not count as a stitch, flip our work, and 1 back loop slip into every stitch. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back. So we have just made our way all the way around with our top band. We're now going to seam it together, and this seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our side seams. So just making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to do our same exact outside loop slip stitch seam that we did for the sides to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so now we're going to get started on the bottom band. The bottom band is going to start with a single crochet row, so let's all start by making sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to do a single crochet row, and we're going to put 2 single crochet into every side half double, 1 single crochet into every side slip stitch row, making our way all the way around. Now this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch, so once when it's completed, try a piece on. If it's a little too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, you do some stitches with a tighter grip, but go ahead and make your way all the way around, then I'll meet you back. We are back and our single crochet row along the bottom is complete. Now from here, we're going to do a back loop slip stitch band, the same way that we did the top band. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12, then do the exact same back loop slip stitch rows, making our way all the way around, no increases, no decreases. Then I'll meet everyone back so we can seam it up together. So we are back. We have just completed the bottom band. Now we're going to seam it up. Now this seam is going to be done exactly the same way as the sides and the top band seam. So just making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, do our same exact outside loop slip stitch seam that we've already done. And now that our bottom band is completed, we're just going to single crochet along our armhole just to clean it up. So first things first, we're going to make sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam within our armhole. Then from here, we're going to put 2 single crochets into every side half, 1 single crochet into every side slip, and just 1 single crochet into every stitch, and just make your way all the way up and around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that our single crochet row is completed, we are all done. Now the last thing we have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all the next one. Bye.